Good morning. This is Hammersmith Chess Club, junior hour in 5 minutes or so. This video is the summary of a session we had in June 2020 on another British legend, Joseph Henry Blackburne. Blackburne was the top British player in the second half of the 19th century. He was actually number 2 in the world, just behind the world champions Steinitz first, and then in later times Lasker, also world champion. A German newspaper called him once the Black Death. Possibly from this picture you see Joseph Blackburne, dark dress. Actually, newspaper said dark head, but other people had dark heads, and everyone had a dark suit. A long beard, well, many people had long and dark beards even. Blackburne already had a white beard that time. Now, probably the nickname Black Death was given to him because he relentlessly killed his opponents on the chessboard, and this in a daring, attacking style, one of the last romantics of the 19th centuries. Now I'm going to show 3 games of Blackburne, 2 in his well-known attacking style. Indeed, I show the finishing sequences. If I would show the whole game, you would see that the games were not free of mistakes, major mistakes, blunders, but for the sequence, definitely he was famous. And the last game will show that Blackburne was not just a tactical player, but also a positional player who was very brilliant in endgame mastery. Now, this was a game he played in 1881 in Berlin. He won that tournament, international tournament, his possibly best performance at the height of his competence. He had just moved, actually he played against a person with the name Schwarz. Schwarz is a German word for black. So black had the black pieces, Blackburne had the white pieces. White had just moved the bishop to f6. And danger lurks for black. Black didn't realize the danger he was in and gave a check on f4, which was the critical mistake. He should have traded off the bishop, exchanged the bishop f6 by bishop e7. Now he gave a check on f4. And what can white do? Should he retreat his king, not to these squares, but f1, which does not lose immediately the queen? Should he maybe take the knight on f4 with the rook, sacrifice in exchange? Or is there something better? Blackburne found something very much better. He sacrificed the queen. Not enough with that. Now he sacrificed the rook. Of course, black will now have realized that he cannot prevent mate on h8. What a wonderful finish of this game. Now the second game, a game against the former world champion Wilhelm Steinitz, played in London 1883. As usual, Blackburne was on attacking mode, and he moved his queen to g5. Not necessarily the best move. Black is, however, in danger, and he didn't realize that. He should have activated his knight, brought his rook on a8 into the game. The queen is still fine there on d8. He wanted, however, to bring his queen closer to the action and to attack and to win the pawn on e6, which was not possible with the queen on d8. And now white started the final attack. And the final attack was happening on the h file, queen and rook together. So how to bring the queen to h6? By bringing a rook to h3. Now, which of the rooks should be brought there? Rook f3, h3, or rook d3, h3. So he made the right decision he decided the pawn on d6 is not relevant, but the open f file dominated by the f rook is important. So the f rook has to stay where it is, and the d rook has to go to h3. Of course, black could capture the pawn on e6. White transferred the rook to the h file. Now queen h6 is threatened, king g8 or h8, and then queen h7 would be made. So black moved the queen to e7 to have h7 defended after queen h6 check and king g8. And now the final blow, what is it? Mate in 2. Yes, the rook on f1. Check on f8. The queen has to take, and mate on f7, on h7. Now the final game, the example to show that Blackburne was also a brilliant endgame player, probably the best in his time, second best. Here he plays with black pieces against Mr. Weiss, and Weiss, another German name meaning white. So Blackburne plays against white with white pieces. Blackburne realized that in this endgame, his knight is domineering the bishop. It is sitting on an outpost where it cannot be pushed away. There is no pawn to push away. The bishop is of wrong color against this knight. The knight can freely wander around. This is a backward pawn. So the ideal position for an endgame with fewer pieces. The queens have the potential to draw because of their possible perpetual checks. So Blackburne offered to have the queens exchange, and white accepted. That was a mistake. He should have maybe moved the queen to f3, and probably he would have been able to keep the balance. But after the queens were exchanged, Blackburne won in style. The king cannot be prevented to move on the right squares because it's a dark squared bishop. Now, the pawns of white are of the wrong color, so it's a bad bishop. The bishop might be out, but might have to defend the pawn. The pawns, only the pawns on the king's side pose a certain danger. White might creep into that open field, which black has to prevent. So look at how black did it. First, he immobilized the bishop. Of course, first he threatens to go to certain squares, other outposts, and so he was forcing white to weaken his pawn structure. Now look at how the knight is domineering the white bishop. The bishop only has, at the end of that diagonal, to go to, possibly, if the king is out of the way. And that is what black prevents. G5 check, F4 check. Now, of course, the pawns are not on their best squares, dark squares for black, because that's the color of the bishop. But on the other side, they prevent the bishop to go along that diagonal. So indeed now, the bishop has no square to go except when being protected by the king. And black doesn't have to worry anymore about the king's side. That's stable. So he can freely move to the queen's side, enter with his king, and with a nice triangulation maneuver, look at this. Now white is in Zugzwang, he has to move. Indeed, white was only able to walk with his king on the white squares. So the triangulation maneuver was working. And whether white retreats with his king, c2, that would have been an alternative. Black can enter the queen side, exchange of pawns, doesn't matter, even bishop and knight, and will be able to win this pawn endgame in an interesting sequence, also with opposition playing a major role. Opposition and triangulation. Okay, let's go back to this position where we had been. Opposition, and we have seen the retreat of white with the king. Now the alternative, what was played in the game, check on a4. Black king has to go back, but next move he can break up the white structure, and even now black has a passed pawn again with a triangulation maneuver. He forces white's king back. Not the pawn which has to be pushed, but the king is storming ahead until the end. And now clearly either white takes the knight here and then mate is to come, or indeed here it was, if there's just a pawn move, it will be mate in one. So what a nice endgame strategy and play by Blackburne. Number 2 in the world, best British player during the second half of the 19th century. The Black Death.